Our next reader tonight is Kate Gadbow. Kate grew up in Cutbank, Montana, on a ranch north of Browning. She was the second of 5 children. She went to the University of Washington from Cutbank, which she said was quite a shock. During her time at the University of Washington, she studied in France for a year, and then she began studying at the University of Montana, where she received a degree in French. She decided that she really wanted to be a writer, and she went back to school and graduated with a master's degree in fine arts from the University of Montana in 1986. Since then, she has been the director of the writing lab at the University of Montana. In 1983, she taught English and math to Hmong students at Hillgate High School, and her present work comes out of that experience. Please welcome Kate Gadbow.
I have to apologize to everyone for my sheep herder's whistle. I almost knocked Leonard over. First of all, I want to thank Laura for sharing her thesis reading with me. It was a great reading, Laura, and it's been great having you in the lab this year. I'm really going to miss you. I've been talking a lot to Laura and to students I've worked with, to other people that are writing too, about the ways that we trick ourselves into getting our writing done. And a lot of this involves somehow making it not so important, or somehow saying, I'm doing this as an exercise. It's not my real writing. Sometimes we do that with our jobs. I think if we've had a particularly bad day, we say, this isn't really what I'm doing. I'm really a writer. But with the writing, we have to do that too sometimes. And the novel I'm working on right now began that way. I started it in 1986, right after I finished graduate school. And I'd been writing these big, long short stories that were turning into chapters of a big, long, convoluted novel. And I told myself I needed to sharpen up a little bit, and I need to an exercise in brevity. So I said, I'm writing a short story under 10 pages. And so I sat down and very quickly wrote out of this teaching experience that I had in 1983, and I'd never written anything about that before. And it came very quickly, and I sort of liked the story. There were a lot of things I didn't like about it, and I sent it around quite a bit, and it finally ended up published in Epic a couple years ago. So I sort of forgot about it and started beating my head against my big, long, convoluted novel again. And last fall, I had another sort of crisis where I was thinking, how can I go on? I can't do this. This isn't going right. So I went back to the voice in that story, and I started thinking about the things I didn't like about the story, and partly I felt it was, in a way, verged too much on being sociological. It was about a situation instead of about a character. So I decided that I was just going to do another chapter and start developing that character and working in that voice, which is something I'd never written in before. It was a present tense voice and a character very... Well, I'm sure every character is like yourself, but her external life is very unlike mine. And so I started doing that, and about 10 chapters came very quickly, and I'm still telling myself this is a distraction, so I can keep going. But so this is a distraction. This is just, we're doing this for fun, and I'm going to read you 2 chapters out of this tonight. I'm reading the second chapter, which is sort of self-contained. It takes place within the classroom and introduces the main character, and she's just started this job. It's from the point of view of a woman named Janet Hunter, who's 36 years old, and her life has been becalmed for several years. She's been teaching 8th grade, which she doesn't like, and she's been divorced for 7 years, and her ex-husband shows up sometimes, but there's really nothing else going on in her life. And she decides to make a change. She'll accept a job teaching these refugee students. And so she takes this job, and she's trying to get to know them when the book starts. Chapter 2 is pretty self-explanatory. Chapter 9 is the other one I'm going to read, and it's sort of where things start happening in her personal life, too, when she takes on this job. And it's sort of where her personal life and her life at school intersect for the first time, is in Chapter 9. There are some people mentioned that I'm not sure you have to know about, but I'll tell you who they are. Judy is mentioned. She's another teacher who shows up a lot in the book. She's kind of a wild woman. She's very different from this narrator in her own life. She'll try anything. She's got lots going all the time. Tom is her ex-husband, and the last time she saw him, he was sort of going off the deep end, or at least she thought he was. This narrator, I'm not sure, is totally reliable. She's feeling herself getting peculiar. And so that's her take on Tom, anyway. Taylor plays a major part in this chapter I'm going to read, and he's a lawyer she met in a bar when Judy dragged her out to a Bonnie Raitt concert. And she's sort of interested in him. And the story does take place in 1983, and not for any particular reason, except that that's the year I did teach Hmong and Vietnamese students, and also because since the Americans left Laos in 1975, many of my students had memories of life before or during the war. They had memories of life before the camps, and that wouldn't be the case with high school students today. So that's the main reason for it. Okay. Oh, also, I'm going to credit, there's a Q-tip costume mentioned in here that I'm crediting to my sister Dee, whether she wants to or not, because she did win a prize with it. I didn't. Okay. All right. This is chapter 2. Each morning, Juavang arranges her desk. It takes a while, and I know she's not listening to me until it's right. Tablet on her left, pencils together, points aligned, books in a pile of graduating size, topped off by the small red Lao English dictionary. Then she looks up. Let the day begin. I thought of Jua last weekend when I bought a shoe rack and cleaned out my closet. I organized by color, then changed my mind and organized by use. The scuffed loafers I wear most in the front, the high heels I never wear but think I might in the back. The things we do for a feeling of control. Jua infuriates me, though I'm not sure why, since I share her impulse for order. Maybe I want to shake both of us out of it, create a connection or force an emotion into her bland gaze. After she arranges her desk, she arranges herself. Short legs in black polyester slacks crossed, small hands folded, face organized into a deferent expression that never varies. She's ready. The shields are up. I know more about these kids than they think I do. Darla Scott, the counselor, tells me their life stories whenever we talk. She emphasizes the worst in a hushed voice, all the medical details, the appalling loss of family. I sometimes wonder why she does it. Does she think if I don't know these things, I'll be cruel? Does she like it in some strange way, the way people like soap operas, grotesque tragedy upon grotesque tragedy? Has this Montana town been too tame for her, made her feel a bit useless in her job as counselor? What a goldmine for givers these people are. They need everything. From Darla, I formed a mental picture of Jua before I ever met her. She was the one coming in at the end of September because she had to wait for her aunt to get here from the camp in Thailand. The aunt now babysits for Jua and 2 other girls in my class. Somehow, they're all related. Jua is 19 and has 3 children, all under 5. Something is wrong with the oldest. That was the one she carried when she lived for a year in the jungle after trying and failing to cross the Mekong. A year of eating bamboo and leaves, of watching others starve. Darla wrote it out in a detailed report I took home to read. I see a girl working beside her parents on a mountain farm. Maybe there's a baby strapped to her back, one of her younger siblings. I imagine her in traditional Hmong garb, the gathered skirt and apron in bright primary colors, the coin-festooned headdress, because that's all I know of their clothing. The things they wear to school come from Lao family community, cast-offs from the locals. I don't know what she's planting, maybe corn for the animals they all tell me they raised. When I try to see the landscape, I first see the mountains of Montana because So Mua told me this area reminds him of home. But that can't be right. It doesn't fit with the television footage of the war, of veterans' descriptions of steamy jungles and elephant grass slicing hands as they crawl. I adjust the picture to a National Geographic photo I have of the jungly mountains of the Amazon with a clearing for Jua's farm. She's on the edge of womanhood, 11, 12 maybe. Her brothers and fathers have been fighting with Vang Pao and the Americans, but she's seen none of that. It's a secret army and a secret war. She sometimes hears distant gunfire or stops what she's doing to watch a helicopter fade into the trees. She works on the farm, caring for the little children, playing games. What kind of games? Again, I'm stopped because I can only think of me at that age, playing kick the can in the early fall dark, the can under a street light, crisp leaves under my feet, and the smell of smoke in the air. Anyway, she plays some kind of game, self-consciously, caught at that squirrely age between child and woman. Then, one day, someone, a soldier I guess, runs into the village and tells them the Americans have gone home, left them, all the Hmong, to the communists who know how closely they've worked with the CIA. Communist soldiers who, some say, are bored with simple killing and now have turned to torture for variety. I'd be frantic. I remember myself at that age, so given to fears that were purely imaginary. An episode of Twilight Zone kept me awake and staring at my closet for a week. What would she do? Would she methodically help her parents gather supplies and make a plan? Or would she stand crying helplessly with the other children? What would she do when they had to take what food they could find and go to the jungle for a year? A year, the report said. And after a failed attempt to cross the river, when her father and grandmother were shot by communist soldiers, whose sole duty was to wait for river crossers, they went back to the jungle for another year to eat bamboo and leaves. Another year. Can these possibly be years she's talking about, or is it a metaphor for a less precise expanse of time that seemed forever to a child? It was so long, in any case, that Jua matured enough to sleep with a boy from another village, to carry his child through the successful crossing of the river, successful except that the father of her child drowned because they were trying to fit 12 people on a makeshift bamboo raft to cross a river a mile wide, except that the child born a day later came way too early and somehow survived and now has multiple problems. In the camp in Thailand, Jua married an older man who'd lost an arm and his wife in Laos. She had 2 more children, another boy, a girl. I conjured up a picture of a fragile Asian beauty, excuse me, a kind of Madame Butterfly scanning the water for her love, or the delicate Okinawan in the tea house of the August moon. Such is my world experience. I saw her lying on the jungle floor, clasped in the arms of a smooth-faced boy who might look like Vin or Pa, the handsomest boys in my class. The couple would stop, turn their heads together, both picking up what could be stealthy footfalls through the ferns, or might be only a monkey or a snake disturbed by their lovemaking. And now here she is, a bland lump, a moon-faced girl rapidly putting on weight. For all her desk arranging, when she does her work, she produces a bare minimum. She tells me nothing when I ask her to write, although she had English in the camp and is more literate than most of the Hmong girls, having had unusual parents who let her learn Lao with the boys. America is very nice. I like go to Kmart and buy a pants. That's her essay. She stops working halfway through the hour and takes out her sewing, embroidering tiny patterns on the red cloth in her hands, her legs crossed at the ankles, and that blank smile on her face. It occurs to me she isn't very bright. It's Halloween. The American kids yip and yell in the halls between classes. Some have spray-painted hair, pink, orange, blue. Some wear masks. As we walk down to lunch, I see Ted Duncan, the senior English teacher, going the other way. He frowns down at his lesson plans over a parrot nose held to his face by an elastic band. Crepe paper pumpkins line the walls of the cafeteria, and a cardboard skeleton swings from the fluorescent light fixture. Craziness is in the air. Christy Brunel, the honors student who helps me with reading groups, has stars painted on her cheeks when she comes in 5th period. The girls laugh at her behind their hands. I tell the class we're going to have a little party, and I pass out orange jack-o'-lantern cookies from Albertsons. Some of the boys wolf theirs right down. The girls take polite nips of their cookies and exchange glances. Vin puts his in the center of his desk and idly draws circles around it with his finger. I try to explain a little of the tradition and origin of Halloween, but I bog down quickly. I tell them I think it might have pagan English origins, Druid maybe, but I really don't know how we came about to have such an outlandish holiday. I fall back on my Catholic school training and say it's the eve of All Saints, which is followed by All Souls Day. This is the week we honor the souls, the spirits of the dead. I'm not sure how that got connected to Halloween, to costumes, but maybe in the past people were afraid of the spirits, so they dressed in frightening masks to scare them away. I'm watching their faces and see this is a mistake. I've tried to do some reading, but haven't done enough. The Hmong have an animistic religion, I know that. For all I know, the souls of their dead fill the air of the classroom, inhabit the philodendron on the windowsill. They aren't tucked away neatly in heaven, purgatory, or hell. The souls of their countless dead. I drop that and get back to costumes. Children always like to dress up and pretend there's something they're not. Tonight you'll see lots of children in costumes going from house to house asking for candy. The ones who've been here more than a year nod and smile. So Mua asks, "Did you dress up in a costume when you were a little child?" I smile at him, a thank you for rescuing me from my own disjointed babbling. I certainly did. The first costume I remember having was a pumpkin suit. Several brows furrow and I stop. You know pumpkin, like a squash? Mua holds her hands around an invisible basketball and translates the word to Hmong. Several girls giggle. Ba points to the untouched cookie on her desk and I nod. That's right, I say, a pumpkin. I was a huge vegetable. My mother sewed a big orange circle with holes for my arms and legs, and we stuffed it full of cloth and newspaper until I was big and funny and fat. I'm clowning for them now, waddling across the room, my hands held around my monstrous pumpkin belly. They're laughing out loud, and even Vin is smiling. I wore a green hat and stockings. I tapped the chalkboard. Green, like this, and I painted my face green, too. They're still smiling. I'm into this now. But the best costume I ever had was the one I made in college. I dressed up like a giant Q-tip. Blank looks. Several girls whisper to me, but she shrugs her shoulders. It's a cotton swab. You use it to clean babies' ears or put medicine on wounds. More blank looks, except for me, who frowns when I say wounds. I draw a Q-tip on the board. Several students smile uncertainly. Others whisper to me, who shrugs again. Christy Brunel looks away, embarrassed for me, I think. Anyway, I say, I put on a big white stocking cap, stuffed it with paper, and big fuzzy slippers. I don't bother to stop and explain slippers, and wore blue tights and a leotard. I won a prize. Suddenly, I'm blushing violently and don't really know why. Several students shift restlessly in their seats. Christy, I say brightly, help me out here. Did you ever dress up in a really great costume? All eyes turn to Christy, and she puts on her dazzling prom queen smile. Well, she says, I was usually just a witch, but one time I dressed up as Tinkerbell. She looks around and adds in the loud, slow voice she uses with these students, Tinkerbell is a fairy. Do you know fairy? Everyone turns to me and she says a Hmong word. They know fairy. Or maybe she said witch because some of them are frowning again. I draw a bad rendition of Tinkerbell on the board as Christy tries to explain her costume. The wings were the hardest part. My mother couldn't figure out how to make them stand out from my back. I tapped the wings on my drawing with the chalk as Christy goes on. We had to make them out of cloth hangers and cover them with this gauze cloth. She stops for a moment. Gauze is this kind of cloth that you can sort of see through. She stops. "This is hard, Mrs. Hunter," she wails. Everybody laughs. Christy goes to her math class, and I pass the cookies around again to the few boys who've eaten theirs. "I should have brought punch," I say, "or something to drink." Wong goes out to the hall for a drink of water. As he opens the door, I hear a cracking boy's yell at the end of the hall, an animal sound, and I remember the other side of Halloween, the side they felt in the air of the cafeteria that sent them scurrying back to the classroom faster than ever. "Who plans to take their children trick-or-treating?" I ask. Tia Vong raises her hand, and so do all the other mothers. Tia's been here 2 years and seems to be the leader of the teenage matrons. I don't really believe them all, but feel I must go on anyway. It's fun to go, but you need to be a little careful. Be sure you go along with the small ones, and even older kids should go in groups. Don't let them wear costumes that will make them fall down, and you have to watch for cars in the streets. They smile and nod, a little indulgently, I think. They're mothers, and I'm not. And also, now this doesn't happen much in Montana, but it could. You have to be careful about the treats people give you. It's better if the children eat only the candy that has paper around each piece. Sometimes bad people put something in treats they make at home, something that could make them sick. And apples, it's better not to eat the apples. They might put something sharp in them. I ask if there are questions, but I don't want to have to explain poison or draw a picture of a razor blade on the board. Already some faces have taken on their old haunted expressions. I was more fun when I told them about the costumes. This business is something they know too much about. Jua sighs loudly and takes out her sewing. She looks down, tunes me out. This is chapter 9. It's 5 a.m. and I'm wide awake, jerked out of sleep by a war dream as scary as a veteran's. I'm me, but I'm not. I'm a Hmong girl walking away from my house toward the jungle. I don't know why. I look toward the trees and think I see something, somebody, a shape that looks for a moment like a man with a rifle, then blends, fades like a ghost into the tree next to it. I'm straining to see in that dream fashion, the way you strain to run and your legs won't move. The harder I strain, the fuzzier everything becomes, melting together until I'm blind but certain an awful presence is moving in. Then I hear it breathing. I guess I can blame Judy for this one. I've tried to stay away from the war movies, but the deer hunter was back in town and she coaxed me into going last night. She said Streep was wonderful and Christopher Walken was cute. Now my head pounds with the whop, whop, whop of copter blades, and Christopher Walken's hooded eyes haunt me. During the Russian roulette scenes, they reminded me of Tom's. I lie awake for an hour until my alarm rings and think of another deer hunter. Pa Lo has been arrested for poaching. I have to talk to the game warden today. Darla called me last night after I got home from the movie, and she said she had the flu or she would go. She thought somebody should be there besides Pa and the interpreter from Lao family, some American who knew Pa and could maybe talk the warden out of filing a formal charge. He walked down into the river bottom yesterday, 4 days after hunting season officially closed, and shot a large doe with this here .30 caliber carbine. The warden nods his head at what looks like a military assault rifle leaning against the wall. He was carrying a quarter of the deer on his back, walking right down the road, real proud of himself, when I drove by and stopped him. The warden stops and tips his chair back. He glanced at Pa when he said real proud of himself, but otherwise he's talking only to me. So it's not just one violation we're talking here. We've got 3 at least. He ticks them off on his fingers. Hunting out of season, rifle hunting in the river bottom, which is bow hunting only, even during the regular season. Shooting a doe, which is illegal in any case after the first week of the season, except in special permit areas. He sits forward again and nods his head at the rifle. Plus, sport hunting with that mother should be illegal, but I guess it's not, though I do wonder how they get them. They and he is how he's referred to Pa ever since we came into the room. I asked him at first to address his comments to Pa, whose comprehension is good. The warden did for a short while, but gradually, as Pa refused to look at him, he began talking to me. And I'm not sure Pa is taking any of this in anyway. He stares at the floor, barely nodding now and then at whatever Vuvang, the interpreter, mumbles in his ear. I have this awful fear he's going to cry. Pa doesn't begin his essays with "in our culture" as so many of the others do. In fact, I never feel his writings are for me in any way. I think he'd write in Hmong rather than English if he knew how. He writes only about Laos, and usually specific personal things in no apparent order. The writings seem to be journal entries, ungrammatical but beautifully detailed, tactile, a straining to remember every small moment of a life that is lost to him forever. The last was about hunting. I go to the jungle with B and Tu for hunt barking deer. He didn't explain who B and Tu are or what a barking deer is. I couldn't tell if it's a species or simply the noise all deer make. The spirit showing in the trees what way he go. That was confusing again, since Pa often mixes word order in a sentence. I didn't know if he believed there were spirits in the trees or if the deer's movement in the trees was what the spirits were showing him. I think I wrote, "Please make this clearer," in the margin. "So what are you going to do?" I asked the game warden. He drums his fingers on the desk, shaking his head. He's a large, robust man, probably in his early 50s, with sandy hair and a ruddy, windburned complexion. He reminds me of my uncle in Ellensburg, who is also a game warden, a simple, good-hearted man who taught me hunter's safety during the brief period I decided to become my sonless father's hunting buddy. Well, there's no way we can just ignore this. As I say, we're talking about 3 violations. Each of them carries a fine or jail time if you can't pay the money. Pa raises his head at the word jail and shoots me a panicked glance. "Are you saying he could go to jail for this? My God, he's only been here 9 months. He's having a hard enough time just trying to get the language down, let alone learn all the rules and regulations." The warden holds up a hand to stop me. I take a deep breath and realize I'm almost as close to tears as Pa seems to be. "I didn't say that," the warden says. "What I said is that I can't ignore it, for a lot of reasons. What will happen is that we'll go to justice court. You may well get a JP who will take all those things into account. I suspect the most that will happen is he'll get a fine and suspension of his hunting privileges, of course. We can't have these guys running around the river bottom with military rifles. Isn't safe." "Would it help if we got a lawyer?" The warden shrugs. "Maybe. Those fellas can charge you more than a fine might turn out to be, though. Unless they're related to you, then they charge you twice as much." He laughs heartily at his own joke and glances at his watch. I put on my coat. "Do you have any questions before we go, Pa?" He looks at me, dazed, and Vuvang whispers something in his ear. Pa says nothing. Vu shrugs at me and shakes his head. Vu stands and extends his hand to the game warden, thanking him. He picks up his coat and paws, guiding Pa out the door. The warden walks us to the door and puts a hand on my shoulder, detaining me as Vu and Pa walk out. He leans down and speaks to me confidentially, his breath smelling of coffee and chewing tobacco. "You know, miss, I wouldn't be too taken in by this innocent act. These guys usually know more about what's going on than they let on. I just got back from a conference in California where they were talking about this very thing. They're having a real problem with the Asians down there." He shakes his head, seemingly oblivious to my icy stare. "They use everything, nets, set lines, snares. One guy even snared a deer, then conked it on the head with a 2x4. He has the gall to wink at me, and most of them are real good at not getting caught. It's before noon when I get back to school, so I don't relieve my substitute. Instead, I go to the teacher's lounge and look up the number for Rusty Sellers' firm. I realize I don't even know Taylor's last name, or maybe his first name. I don't even know which it is. I could talk to Rusty, but I guess I wanted an excuse to call Taylor back. It's only been 6 days since he called me, but maybe my turning him down was all it took to make him think I'm not interested. Is Taylor there? I ask the secretary. She doesn't respond at first, then asks coolly, do you mean Mr. Burns? Yes, I guess I do if Taylor Burns is his name. She takes my name and puts me on hold for what seems a long time. Are you ready for that drink? Taylor drawls, startling me because he hasn't even said hello. Well, yes, I say, at least very soon. Actually, what I'm calling about is a legal matter. I guess I'm looking for some professional advice. I detect disappointment when he answers me, a shifting of gears. The drawl even seems to disappear. How can I help you? I tell him about Pa's arrest and our meeting with the game warden. I tell him the Justice Court date is next Thursday. I was thinking maybe we could just meet and talk about this. I'm not sure there's anything you can do that would make a difference. I think maybe I should meet with Pa, too, Taylor says. I hesitate. Well, the problem is he's on welfare. I'm not sure he can even pay you, although maybe Lau family could. I guess we'll worry about that later, Taylor says. It's Friday, so we set up a meeting in his office for Monday after school. I find myself wondering what I should wear. Pa came back to school with me, but when the afternoon starts, he's not in class. Pa been sick, Ning says, coming to my desk to tell me. He stands there watching me for a moment, even after I nod. I don't write Pa's name down on the absence list. He's missed quite a bit of school already, and this school has a 9-day limit for absences. I consider talking to the students about Pa's predicament because I know all of them, at least the Hmong, are thinking about it. Throughout the afternoon, I feel them watching me, probably wondering about the limits to my power, if and how I can really help any of them beyond teaching them to read. I decide not to discuss it, mostly because I don't know that either. I notice right away Taylor says Pa's name correctly, with a soft awe instead of calling him Pao, as most of the teachers at school do. Vu Vang has come with us to Taylor's office, but after all of us sit at a conference table in one corner, Taylor talks directly to Pa. He speaks slowly at first, about very general things, testing the limits of Pa's comprehension. How old are you, Pa? He asks, holding up a hand to stop Vu from translating this, waiting and watching Pa until the boy is forced to raise his head and answer him. 17, Pa mumbles. I'm not sure that's right, although Pa probably thinks it is. He looks older than the others, and I know from Darla's profile he actually fought in the war. He's probably 19 or 20, but Hmong births weren't recorded in Laos, so age is something else camp and immigration officials arbitrarily assign. Will juvenile status help with a hunting violation, I ask? I'm showing off, trying to sound like I know a lot about the law, and I blush a little when Taylor smiles at me. He knows I am. Maybe, he says, keep it off his record anyway. He turns back to Pa and begins asking him some things about Laos, where he lived, when he left. Pa's replies are minimal, but at least he's talking. When Taylor steers the conversation around to hunting, though, Pa turns to Vu and says something in Hmong. It okay, Vu replies in English, speaking to Pa but looking at Taylor. You can talk to Mr. Burns. He's your lawyer. Taylor doesn't ask Pa anything about what happened at the river. That surprises me at first until I see he has the game warden's report in front of him. He knows their side anyway. Instead, he asks Pa what kind of hunting he did at home in Laos, how he hunted, when, and where. He nods and writes down each of Pa's short replies. Then he tells us what is likely to happen in the court. This will go to Justice Court. We just appear before the JP, and the county attorney will present the state side of the story, and I'll present yours. He looks around quickly at all three of us. That is, if you want me to. I nod. I've already decided if I have to, I'm going to pay Taylor out of my own pocket. The county attorney will try to convince the judge you knowingly violated the law, Taylor continues. Pa is looking at him, confused. That you hunted on the wrong day in the wrong place on purpose, Taylor says. He waits, but Pa doesn't say anything, so he goes on. I'll try to convince him you didn't, and mostly by emphasizing that you're relatively new here, and that there's not a comparable hunting season in Laos. He waits again for Pa to say something, but he doesn't. Vu is nodding and smiling at Taylor as if he's very clever indeed. He says something in Hmong to Pa, who merely nods. With any luck, we'll get Harvey Flynn as judge, Taylor says to me. That's luck, I ask. I've heard of Harvey Flynn. He's rather famous for his capricious dispensation of justice. If you're Irish, you get a smaller sentence. If he grew up with your father, you could get off completely. If he doesn't like the look on your face, he might throw the book at you. There are quite a few Hmong in the courtroom, many I haven't seen before. They sit together in the middle rows of seats. Many are in Western dress, but 2 of the women wear black wrapped turbans and long skirts. I look from one to the other of several middle-aged men, wondering if one of them might be General Vang Pao himself. All their faces are closed, wary. Even the ones I do know to be parents of my students don't respond to my smiles of greeting. Pa sits at a table beside Vu, wearing an out-of-style suit several sizes too big for him. It makes him look young, vulnerable. I wonder briefly if that's a tactic on somebody's part, then decide not, since none of the clothes Pa wears to school fit him very well either. Taylor, seated on Pa's other side, wears a tweed sport coat that fits perfectly. Judy's right. He does look like Sam Shepard. Maybe it's the nose or the lines beside his mouth. We've lucked out and drawn Judge Flynn. When the CA, a gray-suited woman about my age, steps before him, he yawns. He looks old and more than a little out of it. The county attorney uses the game warden's argument. She talks about cases in California involving indiscriminate harvesting of game by Hmong. She says they don't subscribe to a hunting ethic. She ticks off the violations on her fingers the way the warden did. She tells the judge, softly, reasonably, that the most important thing to learn when you come to a new country, for whatever reason, are the rules. She's not asking for jail time, which she very well could, given the multiple violations. But she does think justice would be served, and a very important message would be sent to the Hmong, who have, after all, been brought here as guests of our government, if Pa were forced to pay the maximum criminal penalty of $1,000. In addition, he should make civil restitution for the carcass. She's a good speaker, eloquent, forceful. The judge nods as she finishes and gives her a big smile. She's probably Irish. I have a moment of misgiving when Taylor stands. He's holding a folder I gave him at Monday's meeting after we put Pa and Vu on the city bus, and Taylor walked me to my car. In the folder, I'd put photocopies of Me's Shaman essay and all the writing Pa had turned into me. My intention was for him to use it as background, but I didn't tell him that. Now it looks as if he's going to read from it directly. He walks toward the judge several steps, then stops and turns toward the county attorney. His voice is soft but clear as he begins to read. For hunt, I've been shooting my bow. My father making the bow for me just. He show me all thing about hunting. He good hunter. He dying in 1976. My mother dying before. My bow got lost now. I've been watching the back of Pa's head as Taylor reads. When he gets to the part about the father and mother dying, Pa turns and looks at me. It's a quick glance and not outraged by any means. But there's something in the look, some kind of veiled accusation or embarrassment that makes me flush and causes my attempted smile of reassurance to come off forced. Pa turns back around and I have a sinking feeling, even though the passage obviously had the impact Taylor intended. Heads shake in the small audience and the judge's rheumy eyes are fixed sadly on Pa. Still, I'm wishing Taylor had at least corrected the grammar. I'm sure Pa heard how childlike and simple that sounded. Or maybe it's the parading of his grief he objects to. Vu Vang whispers to Pa what looks like some kind of encouragement, but the rest of the Hmong in the audience sits stony-faced. Taylor reads another short selection, the one about the spirits in the trees, then a short selection from Me's Shaman essay, the part that says the self is divided into 5 souls: reindeer soul, protruding shadow, chicken soul, growing bamboo soul, running bull. Then he turns to the judge. When something is so much a part of your life that it's associated with your childhood, your family memories, even your very soul, I'd say that's a hunting ethic. The problem we're having here is that this hunting ethic Pa's brought with him is colliding with a system of rules and regulations we like to call a hunting ethic in this part of the world. He goes on to explain why Pa may have been confused. The season just ended, so he knew that right up until that time, other people had been hunting. The river bottom has more deer than any other area. In fact, residents along the river complain of the overabundance of deer, so it would make sense to Pa that he should hunt there. Probably the best indication he had no intention of breaking the law was his walking down the road with the deer, in full view of any passing cars. Taylor pauses for a moment and scans the room, lets his gaze linger on Pa before turning back to face the judge. Sometimes, he says, his voice husky, when you've been very hurt by life, as this young man has, it puts you in a place where the only thing you can do to survive is cling to some remnant of your earlier life, something that gave you pleasure in the past and still provides meaning and structure when they've disappeared from every other aspect of your existence. He turns to the county attorney and goes on. I submit that's what motivated Pa to go hunting that day, not any desire to break the law. That, and possibly the need to feed what is left of his family, 7 people who live under one roof. True, they are supported by the government. He nods at the county attorney, who is smiling at him in spite of herself, but only temporarily and not very well. It would be a terrible hardship, suffered by everyone in his family, if he had to pay the maximum penalty the prosecutor is asking for. Taylor stands quietly for a long moment, then shrugs and says, "That's all," to the judge before returning to his seat beside Pa. The old judge rubs the white stubble on his chin and looks thoughtful. Then he beckons to Pa. "Pow, stand up and come here," he barks. Vu pushes Pa to his feet and walks him up to stand before the judge. The judge speaks in a slow, loud voice. "Now listen, Pow," he says, "you are not allowed to go hunting again for 2 years. No hunting at all, you got that? Besides that, I want you to pay $50 to the state for the deer you shot. That'll do it." He calls for the next case. The county attorney starts to get to her feet to object, then sits back down. She shrugs and gives Taylor a little mock salute, her smile openly flirtatious now. People murmur and get up to leave. Several Hmong men approach Taylor and shake his hand. One carries what looks like a ledger book and begins talking to Taylor in a businesslike way. Vu is holding Pa's arm and chattering excitedly to him, but Pa just stands still, his expression unchanged, seemingly unaware of how lucky he is. That's it.